Hi everyone. Good evening. I hope all of you are doing well and you had a decent attempt at CAT slot 3. So I'm going to share my experience and of course talk about the experiences that we gathered from various mentors of IMS who took the test in this particular slot and the students. And we are going to talk about how the overall paper was. Was it more difficult than slot 1, slot 2? How does it, let's say, compare against last year? So we are going to have all of those discussions today. Okay. So let's get started and thanks for joining everyone. We are going to have two more sessions after this. We're going to have an overall analysis at 9:30 p.m. and we're also going to have a session to discuss the next steps very late in the night. So I hope to see students there as well. So let's get started. Okay, the voice is echoing. Okay, is that the case for everybody? Let me just check once. Okay, is it better now? Just let me know. All of somebody can just quickly confirm if it is fine. Okay, just going through some of the. Okay, it's fine. Okay, I think pretty much everybody. Okay, I think it's fine. All right, so let's start. So now from slot 1, of course, people who entered slot 3 kind of knew what to expect. There was no surprise on that front. So the number of questions didn't change: 24 in VRC, 22 in DILR, and 22 in QA. Total 68 questions. The format was exactly the same as last year in that sense. 120 minutes, 40 minutes for each section, and the marking scheme, there was absolutely no change there, right? So I'll not spend more time on this. Total, of course, 68 questions is what we had. When you look at VARC, parajumbles came back. So again, that was there in slot 1 and slot 2 as well. So people who entered slot 3 knew that they are going to get parajumbles and mentally were prepared for that. And RCVA not being clubbed together. So that was the case last year as well. So no surprises on that front. DLR, again, no surprise in terms of the number of sets. 5 sets were there, 22 questions, 3 sets of 4 questions each, and 2 sets of 5 questions each. Okay. Now, let's talk about the initial estimates first. Okay. So, this is where we think things lie based on the initial estimates that we have got. So VRC, I personally again found it very similar to CAT 24 slot 1. So wasn't very different from that in terms of the overall difficulty. The only thing in VRC this year was, of course, the fact that the RCs were slightly dense to read and the options were also pretty lengthy. So there were some questions wherein the answer options were pretty long sentences. So you had to sort of read through it. Some of the questions were direct, but some of the questions you really had to read the RC to answer those questions. And of course, read the options also very carefully. But VRC overall was very similar. And when you talk about slot 2 or slot 3, the element of surprise reduces, right? When you look at slot 1, they tend to experience the surprise for the very first time. Slot 2 and 3, not so much. So that impact goes down. And that is why VRC should be very similar to the numbers we have reported for slot 1 and slot 2 as well today. DLR was a mixed bag, I would say. There were some sets which were extremely straightforward. One could have quickly done them in about 5 minutes as well. So there are students who have been able to solve some sets in under 5 minutes. But of course, there were sets which were very lengthy. And if you started with something like that, of course, you would have spent far more time and then you would have ran out of time, right? But yes, there were a couple of sets which were doable, and we'll talk about that as we progress. In terms of QA, this is where the biggest problem was. And I'm going to go out and say that Quant was difficult. It wasn't easy for sure. So people in slot 1, a lot of them reported that Quant was very straightforward, Quant was easy. Quant was definitely not easy. And if I have to put it against, say, CAT 23 or CAT 24, I would say that it is easier than CAT 23 for sure, because CAT 23 had a lot of questions which were from different topics, concepts from different topics clubbed together to create a question. And that is like a hallmark of a difficult question. But today it wasn't that way. So you didn't have questions coming from concepts coming from different topics. It's just that the question itself is lengthy. And for a lot of questions, in fact, I was speaking to some of the mentors as well. Uh, and even personally, I found myself reaching out to the calculator multiple times, and that typically does not happen. So anybody, right, who had some comfort with that calculator would have benefited, because you had to use the calculator for a lot of questions. And even Some questions in arithmetic you had to use the calculator, or in numbers you had to use calculators. So knowing calculator or knowing how to use calculator would have helped, but not so much that you would have done like really well on the paper. So slightly more difficult than cat 24 for sure, but not as difficult as cat 23. That is where my quant verdict lies. But quant was definitely kind of painful. The words that I can use to describe it are going to be frustrating, irritating, calculation intensive. The questions were not something that you cannot solve. I mean, if I give you enough time to solve, I think people will be able to solve most of the questions. But solving it in under 40 minutes, that is where the challenge lies. So overall, what we believe, again, based on the initial estimates and the things that we saw in slot 1 and slot 2, slot 3 sits somewhere between slot 1 and slot 2. Right? Slot 1 appears to be the one which is easy compared to the slot 2 and slot 3. Slot 2 turns out to be pretty difficult, and slot 3 sits somewhere between slot 1 and slot 2. That is where the current estimates lie. Okay, what is the overall difficulty? Okay, so overall difficulty, uh, as I said, it is little difficult to comment on like an overall difficulty thing. But if I have to compare it against CAT 24, let's say any one slot, maybe slot 1, for example, VRC very similar, DILR also similar, maybe slightly more challenging than CAT 24. QA definitely more challenging than CAT 24. So compared to CAT 24, the cutoff should drop a little bit. That is what the initial estimates are. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the individual section. So VRC medium, again, as I mentioned, similar to CAT 25 slot 1. No major surprises. People who walked in slot 3 knew what to expect. DILR medium to difficult. And why do I make that statement is because again, it depends on what questions you select. So there were some sets, and if you encounter those sets very early on and you figure out that, okay, this is doable, this is the approach, this is the path to take, it would have been very, very easy to crack them. LOD higher than CAT 25 slot 1, because slot 1 again people said it was very straightforward and all, but less than slot 2, because slot 2 people again came out and said that it was very difficult. Okay, QA definitely, as I said, difficult, higher than CAT 25 slot 1, but less than slot 2. Okay, so as I said, it sits somewhere between those two slots. Overall LOD higher than slot 1, but less than slot 2. Okay. So let's talk about the individual areas. Okay, so let's start with VRC. Now in VRC, one ideally could have done somewhere around 3 RCs, and most of the VA questions, some of the VA questions were a little bit challenging, but except those, you could have done most of the questions in VA as well, and at least 3 RCs one could have attempted. From an overall difficulty perspective, the ill effects of dams was an easy RC because it wasn't very challenging to read as well. The AI and ethical decision making one was medium because you had to really read it properly. Even the Forest Act, because there were a lot of nuance to it. The tribal art one was like a difficult RC, right? So that was like the consensus that we had, that uh, this is how we should rate those RCs. Of course, depending on your comfort of reading a particular type of RCs, your perception might be different. But this is what we found to be like an overall assessment of it. On the VA front, in each of the 4 question types, so there's a paragraph completion, summary, odd sentence, jumbled paragraphs. When you look at para completion and summary, these are the MCQs, whereas odd sentence and jumbled paragraphs is TITA. And in each of them, you had like a mix of easy, difficult, easy, moderate kind of questions. So one question from paragraph completion and one from summary can be classified as difficult. Others can be classified from easy to moderate level, right? As I said, one could have attempted about 5 to 6 VA questions and about 3 RCs if you are like a decently prepared candidate. Now let's talk about DLR. And DLR is where some people encountered easy sets in the beginning and they were able to knock it off very quickly. Uh, if I have to rate, the 6 friends calling each other was definitely a doable set with 4 questions on it. It's just that you had to persist in this particular set because there were 6 friends and then there were 4 columns, right? So there are a lot of values to work with. If you had put in effort, you would have mostly got everything right. Okay. Then there was one set on 4 friends solving puzzles. There were 2 charts in this, colorful charts. Again, not difficult. It was possible to solve this one in about 5 to 7 minutes also. Some people said that we were able to solve this in under 5 minutes. 6, 7, 8 minutes maximum, and you would have got all the questions correct. Okay, if you had selected this particular set. And then there was a circular arrangement one, which most of the people found it to be easy, whereas some people said that there was a little bit of an issue with this particular set, which some of them found it. I'm not saying everybody, but yes, this was also a doable set. So what you should have stayed away from, and there were clear signs that you should have stayed away from something, was the currency exchange one, because there are different currency exchange rates which were given, and the import export one, because again there also you had a lot of unknowns when you started putting things on paper. So if you had chosen wisely to stay away from the currency exchange and the trade balance, you would have had a very good outcome today, right? So if you had spent all your energy on those first three sets that we have written, you would have come out with a smile on your face that okay, I've done very well in the DLR section. And that brings us to the last thing, quant. As I said, right, frustrating, irritating, whatever you want to call it, because of the length of the questions, right? So you have to, some of the questions you had to use the calculator, some of the questions you had to do a lot of writing to finally come to the right thing, right? For example, something like that x raised to 7 plus 1 upon x raised to 7, and you have a starting point which is x square plus 1 upon x square. So to make the question easy, one can always ask, let's say, what is x raised to 8 plus 1 upon x raised to 8? But now you have x raised to 7 plus 1 upon x raised to 7. So you have to do a lot of calculations, lot of writing to ultimately hit the right thing, right? So that is why quant wasn't difficult in the sense that quality of questions, but it was difficult because of the length of the questions as to how much rough work you need to do or how much solving you need to do to arrive at answer of that particular question. Okay, so 7 arithmetic, 4 algebra, 4 numbers, 3 geometry, 4 modern math. And this is where the normalization plays a lot of role, because if you see slot 2, and when I walked into slot 3, I had just seen some of the early reviews of slot 2 on our discussion group. People said slot 2, there were no modern math questions. There was no PNC, is what I saw. And then when you have that, something like that, it becomes very difficult to normalize, because if you want to create papers that are balanced papers, you should ideally have at least the topic wise distribution equal. That results in much better or much fairer sort of and a paper for everybody. And the normalization also doesn't happen a lot in that sense. But when you have questions appearing from different areas, right, it becomes a sort of a problem, right? So again, my take on it, but we never know, right? So let's see what is in store for us. Hopefully next week or the week after that, the response sheet of cat will be out. So for those of you who are taking it for the first time, second third timers know the drill, but for the first timers, the response sheet will be out. Using response sheet, you will be able to calculate your exact raw score, and then we will be coming up with percentile prediction, right? So we'll have an estimate of how much normalization is going to happen across the three slots and what percentile you can expect. So the initial estimates is what I'm sharing with you for slot 3. These are the numbers that we're looking at. So as I said, for 99 percentiles in VRC, it was possible for somebody to get to around say 15, 16, 17 attempts with good accuracy to eventually land up at about 41 raw score. In DLR, if you had attempted 3 sets, right, and for most 99 percentilers, 3 sets was definitely doable. Let's say you do all 3 sets of 12 questions, right? Maybe you get one question wrong, so 11 right, one wrong. That brings you to around 32 marks in DLR at about 99 percentile. In Quant, if you had just kept your 100% accuracy, solved 10 questions, and come out of the whole thing, you would have got a 99 percentile. So that is why it's around 30. But for 85, if you see, the estimates are very similar to what we had for, say, something like a CAT 23, which was a difficult paper, right? So overall, this is how things look. So slot 1 appears to be the easy one. Slot 2 appears to be the most difficult one, and slot 3 seems to be something sitting in between slot 1 and slot 2. Okay. As I mentioned, you have to wait for the response sheet to be out, which should be out in a week's time. Generally around 5th, 6th, 7th December typically is when they release it, but we'll see when that happens. Uh, right now, you don't have to make most of your application decisions based on the initial estimates that you see. Okay, so don't take any decision or take any decision or do not take any decision based on what you see here. But this is for you to get a sense of where do I stand. And if I'm sitting in a particular ballpark, right, at least I know maybe with that plus or minus 1 or 2 percentile range, I can make some decisions. And definitely from here on, you have to look forward to what is going to happen. You have to focus on the remaining things. What's done is done. There isn't much that you can do about it. So we're going to have an overall analysis at 9:30 p.m. wherein we'll be comparing slot 1, 2, 3. We'll be talking about that. And we'll be having a session at 11 o'clock as well, wherein we talk about the next steps. The revised percentile estimates we will be giving after the response sheet is released, which, as I said, will happen sometime in first week of December. Okay. Uh, Okay, as a lot of people are saying, slot 2 is difficult. That's what I can see in the chat window, chat section of YouTube. Toughest slot 3 seem 23 level. So, see, if you've seen 23, Quant was difficult in 23 because of various reasons. Today's paper wasn't like that. And you can actually take out CAT 23 paper, go through each and every question, and you will see that today wasn't the case where there are questions coupled from like different topics or different concepts. It's a straightforward question, but it's just that you have to do a lot of writing to arrive at the answer, or you have to use calculator to arrive at the answer. So very few questions were like, okay, fine, you read the question and you know exactly that, okay, these are the steps, you do this very, very quickly, you get the answer. So that wasn't happening enough. So not like as difficult as CAT 23, but definitely more difficult than CAT 24. Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining. I hope this quick slot 3 discussion has helped you. I'll see you soon for the overall analysis at 9:30 p.m. Okay, bye everyone. All the best.